All right, welcome to the February meeting of the Western North Carolina Linux Users Group. Hope you all have had a great January. You know, not tremendously cold, but it tried there for a little bit. I don't think we have any specific things going on today. Correct me if I'm wrong, but let's just go around the room and see what everyone's been up to. I think Dick has a lot to fill us in on because we've not seen him in a very long time. So let's start with him.
Oh my, well, I'm not sure that I could go through it all by chapter and verse, but nonetheless, as I said earlier, I've been busy trying to get my Linux distribution back up and working because my PC ate it up, the desktop at any rate. And I finally got that taken care of, and I'm busy rebuilding everything so that I can get back to using that as my prime mover rather than being stuck with the alternative, which I don't like very much, but there it is. We moved down here up here, it'll be 5 years in November, and still learning all about the area. Being in Indiana is a different experience than being in North Carolina, mainly because you can see forever in Indiana. It's so flat. But some of you know I'm also a ham radio operator. That took me about a year to get an antenna back up in the air, and so I divide my time between working with photography and ham radio and Linux and trying to keep up with everything else around here. So that's pretty much a capsule summary of what's been going on. But every month I get the letter or the email that tells me that the meeting is coming up. And finally, this time I said, I'm going to do it. I set my alarm, in fact, so that I could remember to check in. But it's good to see all of you. And Steve, you're not looking any older than the last time I saw you in person. So at any rate, and Gene, you're not either.
No, but there's a picture of Steve up in the attic that looks horrible.
What?
Remember Dorian Gray?
And Pete, it's good to see you too, always. So.
All right, thanks, Dick.
Hey, you're welcome.
One quick question: What killed your computer? Was it the hard drive that died, or?
Well, I don't know. All of a sudden, it would not. The grub function wouldn't work anymore, and when I tried to bypass it, that didn't work either. And then when I come to find out, when I took the hard drive out and looked at it on another computer, the whole boot sector was gone. And I don't know how that happened, but it did. Fortunately, I still have the disk, and I can get into the files that were on there, so I'm not really out anything. It's just a bother to transfer everything over.
Well, that's good.
So I tried this new SSD stick, and it's only a 256 gigabyte one, and I really need a terabyte one. So I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and get it. So that's all from me.
Dick, are there any intersection between your radio and Linux hobbies? Doing any like SDR type stuff?
Well, yeah, I did do that, and I'm getting into using a program called, it's a ham radio design program by a guy in Tennessee, and it will get me into or on the digital modes that are out there for ham radio. And it's a slow process. I take things a whole lot slower than I used to, and I find that it works out better in the long run. So, but yeah, I have used several programs with SDR. I got a couple of handheld radios that I can use with a dongle to talk to other ham radio operators around the country via the internet. So it's really voice over IP, but it's RF between my handheld and the dongle on the computer. So there you go.
Hey, Dick, is that stick you were referring to, is that M.2? Is that what you're?
Yes, yeah.
That's what I have. I have a 250 gig.
Yeah, and it's a nice drive. I mean, you virtually cannot tell it any different from the one that's in the computer that starts up, because it really loads very quickly.
Oh yeah, it's about 10 times faster
boot
than
off
a
of that?
standard.
Yeah.
Do you boot off of the SSD stick?
Yes.
Same here.
And in fact, Grub is on it, so I just leave the stick in it all the time. But if I go to Windows for some dumb reason or another, then I have to go through some gymnastics to get it back to load Linux. But it's not hard; it just takes a couple of minutes. So.
You have to upgrade the Grub. That's all. You have to run Grub update.
Yeah, well, it already shows the Windows on there, so I can go to it, but I can't get back to it. That's the big deal. So,
okay.
Dick, I've had a couple of problems with losing boot access, and ultimately I ended up going into the UEFI BIOS and finding that I could find another option to boot. In the latest one, it took me forever to find out where that was in this particular BIOS, because it wasn't obvious. It was under something called BBS, which I have no idea why it's called bulletin board. But I thought the whole thing was ruined. But basically, just changing to another boot choice, which included that partition with that OS, enabled it to work. I don't know whether you've got multiple OSs other than Windows and one Linux, or whether you've got multiple Linuxized partitions. But every time you install or reinstall, it may be that you get a new Grub EFI, if it's a UEFI computer. And you have if you find a place to modify the boot options, you may find that magically it'll boot again.
oh, thanks, Steve. I'll take a look at that.
All right. Thanks, Dick. Anything else?
No, you've heard enough out of me today, but it's good to be back.
Yeah, welcome back. Let's talk to Rusty if he's ready. If you're talking, you're muted, but you're also dark, so we can't tell if your mouth is moving. Or even present, really.
Earth to Rusty. Earth to Rusty.
Paging Dr. Maynard.
In operating.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Sure. Very good.
Oh, good. I'm using the Jitsi application on an old little tablet, Android tablet. I probably need to update it. So I've been eating cornbread. I had a late breakfast and cooked up this cornbread completely fills the pan, about 10 inches in diameter and about 2 to 3 inches thick. But anyway, I am. Second, folks. Oh my gosh! I set the coffee maker on the wrong direction so that it's in the steaming mode. When you froth up the. I've never used coffee with the frother, but it looks like I didn't get anything to pass through the filter because the frother took all the water. But anyway, haven't been up to any earth-shaking things on my computers, but I do want to bring a question to everybody who's on right now. And that is, what is your choice for a note taker application? and how much are you using the cloud? I've raised this question before in just open discussions, and I know I've heard of Obsidian from Dan, but I'm just still, this is the larger question of where should you keep your notes, and so I'm interested to hear who is using the cloud as a note-taking location, so that your notes therefore are accessible when you're on various machines. And if you use the cloud, how much do you see note-taking as being an application on the operating system, or is anybody finding a browser-based note-taking application that uses the power of notes in a bookmark system? My point here is that I'm thinking more of notes that are related to your browsing experience, where you're searching and sifting through what's available, and then you're needing to add your own thoughts and comments and organization. I've never used notes actively on a bookmark system. I believe that there are notes available on some bookmark setups, but I'm just curious to hear of experiences of people that are using one favored note application or another, and particularly applications where you can easily integrate it with your browsing experience. I'll point out another example, and that is I've used Zotero some in the past, which is really for bibliography and papers. And it is good at grabbing metadata. If you're at a particular research paper, it'll grab the title, I guess even the URL, like a bookmark manager, it'll grab the URL. It'll grab title, author, and all this salient things, and then you can add your own notes to it. I've only used that once, and I've never used it, and that was kind of related to a paper. But anyway, I'd love to hear people comment on this, because are you on the cloud with a note taker? Do you use a note taker at all? Is it on the cloud? Is the application hosted by the operating system, or is anybody integrating, getting a tool that's integrated with the browser? Just any thoughts?
Yeah, Rusty, I've mentioned Obsidian before, and it keeps everything locally on the hard drive in folders. It doesn't do it in the cloud unless you want it in the cloud. But by default, it's stored locally in Markdown in the in folders on your hard drive. And I wouldn't go to another note taker. It's far more than a note taker, though. It's kind of like a personal knowledge management system. But Zotero is not a note-taking app. It's a bibliography manager. Yeah. So I wouldn't consider that a note-taking application. But I mean, I would recommend Obsidian over anything. And I've used EndNote and several others.
And is it correct that Obsidian, the hierarchy or the tree of notes, in the sense of a built-up table of contents, the tree is actually a tree of individual folders and files within folders?
Yeah, it's called a file explorer. And then within Obsidian, you do everything in Markdown. And within Obsidian, you can create what's called a map of content. And you can link all of your notes through that map of content so that you can easily find it. You can use tags to do it as well. And I mean, it's amazing, the complexity with which you can develop your note taking, and the fact that you can link notes together and map them so that when you're on a note, you've got other notes that map to it, and that way it brings all the knowledge in one place, so you don't have to go searching for it. It's remarkable.
Can Obsidian grab metadata that is within an HTML document?
Yes.
And so it's kind of programmable. And are there some specific types of metadata that, well, a URL is part of the metadata of the document, you could argue. But what are some of the common metadata tags that you can sort of program to grab just from a pick list, where it might, you might consistently say, give me a date of publication where that metadata tag occurs, or
well, it
grab
depends
the
on
title.
It depends on the plugin that you're using. There are community plugins, and then there are default plugins, core. They call them core plugins. And there's like over 1,200 community plugins. So there are a plugin that will, for like your extraction of metadata from HTML, there's probably, half dozen of those that will do what you're talking about. I can't get into the details about it. It's too complex for this forum. But I mean, if you get into Obsidian and you start looking at the community plugins, what's available, and you pull those down and start using them, you build your own theme. You build your own template that to do what you're talking about. And like I said, I've been using Obsidian now for well over a year, and I won't go to any other note-taking application. I mean, it's the best I've ever seen.
And you have it running so that you're using your home network to access from different machines. So you have it updated automatically as one collection.
Yep.
That's.
And
if
but
you weren't
I don't use the built-in sync process with Obsidian because that costs money. It's it's an open source, somewhat open source app, but there are some non-open source segments of it. One of them is syncing process. I use SyncThing to do it.
What can you name that again?
SyncThing, SyncThing, and it allows me to sync all of my Obsidian applications. Sorry, my dog's barking. Across the network. I'm gonna have to grab my dog and take her up to my wife here.
Yeah, thanks.
Excuse me for a second.
Anybody else doing note taking, particularly with a unified file that's reachable conveniently from various machines? And that comes down to whether or not one has to have an application that's identical on each machine, or whether you can find a management tool that lives on the cloud or lives on the network.
Rusty, if no one's going to speak, I will offer the following negative information. I am currently, I use LeafPad or another text editor like Nano if I want to write notes. And otherwise, I'm using LibreOffice if it's fancy. I print out a lot of papers if I want to look at them. Mainly these are medical ones that are relevant to my little bit of practice. And otherwise, since since I haven't been planning any master um, monographs to compose or write, I don't have anything in mind that I think requires that I have such a a document synthesizer or editor type program.
Well, my use of it is particularly to be able to integrate my own thoughts in small little tidbits, small packages, and keep those associated with anything that's a related resource. A resource might be a URL from browsing. A resource might also be an internal path pointing to a file that hopefully stays in the same relative location on my file system. But I'm wanting to start staying in some sort of multi-purpose note application, and it's getting to where I naturally use folders to store documents or PDFs that I may have pulled down. Within that, I sometimes will put I don't have a consistent naming, but I will often put a small text file in a folder that's explaining what's in the folder and a collection of thoughts that I might have had. And very often I put URLs there interposed with my thoughts. So the problem is that each of those text files that are topical are isolated. They're off in a multiplicity of folders, and knowing that they're there, I will either want to integrate them into a note-taking application or point to them through the path on the file system.
Well,
so,
Rusty, let me ask you for a clarification, and maybe Dan would step in if he thinks he has an answer. Are you looking for a document management system or note taking?
No, a note-taking system where that will be my go-to note taker that can grab URLs and kind of function as a source of bookmarks, and of course something is searchable. So that's probably to have any sophistication, it probably needs to be an application running on the operating system rather than a plug-in to a browser or so it would be there have been various ones. They're also called personal information managers.
Yep.
And a lot of those get used for name and address and those things, but I'm not so much interested in a contact name and address manager. I'm more interested in the pure note taking and the ability to have some feedback or some access to the document that the browser is viewing. Taking Zotero, with Zotero, there's a browser plugin for each browser that is in charge of talking to the browser, and when you point to a reference page, it grabs the data that the browser sees. In other words, it parses the HTML, and so it's got to have that would be an ideal thing to have it. I would go to not using bookmarks at all on a browser if I had a note taker that would grab that, you know, the URL and title and other salient things, you know, from the browser target page.
Rusty, you can edit in Firefox. I know you can edit if you bookmark a page, you can go up and edit the text in that the line that has the name of the bookmark on it.
Mm-hmm.
That would serve your purpose.
Hey, Rusty, I got a comment, but Brent's got his hand up. Brent, you got your hand up there. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
That must have been a stray click. I don't know how that happened.
Oh, okay. What I wanted to, you know, Rusty, what I'll do for you is Obsidian will do exactly what you're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
What I hear you saying is you want to be able to write a note, and in that note, you want to be able to reference a URL, a link outside or inside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you want to be able to put that in the note, but you want it to be able to find it, link to it, so that you don't have to go looking for it. Okay.
Yeah.
Obsidian will do exactly that. So what I would offer to you is this. I will put together a video showing you my use of Obsidian, doing things like that, and send it to you so that it's not in the entire group. It may not be of interest to everybody else.
You're going to deliver me a YouTube video?
Yeah.
By
not a YouTube
by
video.
email.
Not a YouTube video. I want to link you a video that I create.
Oh.
That'll be up on my personal NAS that you can click on and download and run in like VLC media player.
It's a TikTok.
No,
I look forward to that.
It's not a TikTok. You know what the PRC is? It's not the People's Republic of China. It's the People's Republic of California. So anyway, but anyway, how about that, Rusty? Is that a deal?
Sure. Yes. I look forward to that.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Rusty. Steve, what do you got going on?
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I'm playing with my three different computer systems that all basically I have Antics running on different versions, and basically back to trying to learn as a permanent newbie, trying to learn. Currently, I'm scratching my head. I think I mentioned it maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, about getting, what is this? Getting Pipewire working in a systemd-free environment, and it seemed that I needed a script, that there was a dependency on the run user 1000 account that's supposed to be a temporary file system that is launched at boot or shortly after, or after login, I guess, or with login, and then is closed down, eliminated when you close down. I'm imagining that this, on the one computer which runs a full version, that happens automatically. The desktop sessions files are all there. I didn't have to set up anything. It's all by default. It sets up in the temp directory, the user 1000. With the script I'm running, it works okay, but it sets up the directory because of the way the script is written. It sets it up in the run directory, not the temp. But I assume the run is a temp directory also by another name. And so I'm scratching my head to figure out, since I have all the basic files, there's some kind of inhibition because I'm running OpenBox, and the auto start is coming out of OpenBox instead of the default desktop sessions. So I'm trying to, with the help of the folks on the Antics forum, figure out what I need to do, either to reconfigure open box auto start so that it will take over for the desktop sessions program file that would do that. And then the other thing which I wrote about, which really fascinated me, was the UEFI, understanding UEFI as not just fixed firmware code, but recognizing that the UEFI and the BIOS both are code that includes code to talk to the operating system, so that when you update or install a new OS, the BIOS or UEFI becomes aware of it. And I was thinking for the last 15 years that the firmware is fixed, frozen, and it just sits there, does its job, and then leaves when the OS takes over. But actually, since in fact the boot options, if nothing else, adjust when you add a new operating system, that obviously isn't that simple. And then, as I wrote, I think to folks, well, I thought of that as a shell and looked up and found that in fact some UEFIs have shells, real shells that are distinct from the terminals, but that you can invoke. So this was all fascinating. That's way beyond my grade level, but just that is what I've been futzing with over the last few weeks. And I just wonder if anybody has actually, the professionals here have actually used, or the amateurs who are power users, have actually used the UEFI shell as such, beyond just manipulating the variables in the UEFI menus. And that's it.
Thanks, Steve. Any responses to what Steve had addressed there?
I
My response is I'm not even sure what firmware is. I mean, I think I know what software is. I think I know what hardware is, but my Ubuntu is constantly updating the Linux firmware, and I don't know what they're doing there. So I would also appreciate an explanation of some of the more esoteric parts of that.
Well, one of the things I was going to say for Steve is it's important to remember, Steve, that EFI and UEFI are different. EFI is extensible firmware interface, and the UEFI is the unified extensible firmware interface. They're not the same, and they're, I don't know exactly the distinction between the two, but they are different. No, I have not used the shell, and I was kind of surprised when I saw that from you, that there was such a thing as an UEFI shell. So I have to look into that more in depth myself.
Let me respond. I understand the UEFI specification is the current one. Actually, though, mentions EFI. The two things are linked.
They're linked.
They are distinct,
Right.
but linked.
Right.
And that's in fact how the magic happens, that UEFI can be aware when EFI packages or files change.
Yep.
I have some insight, possibly from years ago, when the BIOS that was unique to every brand of computer was replaced with EFI. Different company used different EFIs, and it was causing issues in a number of ways, so that they eventually came up with a UEFI unified, which every company uses a UEFI, so there are no issues, or not as many issues as there were when they first switched over to the EFI.
Yeah, it's an industry standard.
Yes, and so I think they use it now. The firmware concept is the original back in the days of the BIOS. The BIOS was software that was burned into a read-only chip or modifiable read-only chip at the factory when the computer was assembled, but it was possible to update it as bugs were found with a special program that could go in and unlock the chip that the firmware is stored on and update it and then lock it again.
Right. It's called an
I think they
EEPROM.
still do that.
Flash.
Yeah,
EEPROM. Actually, the chip itself that you referred to, Pete, is called a CMOS chip. It's a complementary metal oxide semiconductor chip, and it has an EEPROM built into it so that you can electronically upgrade it, flash it, and then it stays.
But then lock it.
It locks it, yeah, so that you can't write to it, but only when you want to.
Right.
It's a read only.
So,
but there's also what Gene was mentioning made me think that periodically I get updates to like the Intel microcode, and that's called firmware, but it's coming in as part of an apt update. So it's not coming in via flash. So it seems like they're using it for two different things.
Well, flash is the name of the hardware. The update is a software update to the firmware, to the stuff
but
that's been burned.
the firmware that you update via flash is the BIOS or UEFI. Either one is distinct from when you're running the operating system and you say, let's see if there's an update or, via app and in Debian apt. And it says, oh, Intel microcode, there's a new version. Do you want to install it? And that's installed as a deb, it's not installed via flashing. So they still call it firmware, but it's obviously two different things.
Yeah, it's an update.
I'll have to look into that.
That's just to confuse Gene.
No clue.
I'm permanently confused.
I'm starting to get confused.
It's random destination.
I also have been very curious about exactly how that microcode is implemented. I would assume it's just it's sort of a way that to keep the processors updatable, like to deal with like security issues, which have been obviously a thing with processors lately. That was never something we ever worried about back in the day. I don't know exactly how. I'm gonna have to look into that because it's one of those things that's always in the back of the mind. I'm like, yeah, firmware, microcode, okay, sure, let's do that. But what's happening? No idea.
Back in the day when we were still using floppy disk drives, the little ones, the 3.5, I think.
Yeah.
And I was working for IBM. As a field engineer, we were issued a special floppy drive that would unlock the EEPROM and allow us to make changes. And it was not available to most people.
All right. Anything else, Steve? You're muted, Steve.
There. Well, I always hope that someone will say I've used. I always hope. I hope that someone will pipe up, perhaps Leander, and say I've used the UEFI shell all the time. It's my daily thing. But I have a feeling since you didn't say anything, that it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've used
Leander.
it. I've used it. Sorry, I had a hardware mute. But I've used it plenty, mostly for things I really can't talk about. But yeah, I'm pretty familiar with. That's not a joke. That's some NDA stuff. But yeah, no, I'm familiar with you can do a lot of different things with the UEFI shell. It's got its own network stack and all that stuff. And yeah, so for some hardware testing and whatnot. But yeah, I've used it before. I've been. I remember when it first came out. That was I think Apple was one of the first early adopters of it when they switched to Intel in 06. Most people were still using a BIOS, most manufacturers. And that was one of the early ways to dual boot a Intel Mac into Linux or Windows was to drop into the break out to the UEFI shell and do it that way.
Interesting.
All right, thanks, Leander. Pete, what do you got going on?
Okay. I was expecting to be on this meeting from my warm, sunny house down in Florida, but if you can see the background, I am up on my mountaintop in North Carolina about a week earlier because my furnace died, and I was really concerned. It was really cold up here about 3 or 4 days ago, I guess. I came up. I was afraid, pipes would freeze and blow up and things would get damaged. And even though I had drained them, I got up here and there was a hot surface igniter that I've had to replace over the last 10 or 20 years, maybe 5 times. The furnace is a 94 furnace. It's a Coleman hot air propane fired furnace. I don't think they make them anymore, but at least not by
during one of the strike times. That's what they used to say about cars that were lemons that they were built when they were on strike.
Well, this thing has been running really well, and I have spared up. I think I've got 100% spares, which came in handy when I got up here at 7 o'clock in the evening and spent a couple of hours diagnosing and replacing. But so anyway, I am up here, and it's warmed up quite a bit. My main reason I was going to come up a week later for my 4-week follow-up from my cataract surgery, which is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I'm looking out the window and I can see every twig and thing in the bark on the trees and no glasses.
It's nice, isn't it?
Oh, it's a different world. And everything is so bright. I have to wear sunglasses when I go out and drive around. I highly recommend it. Can't beat it. Okay, so Linux stuff. Right before I left, I had a friend with a Windows machine, and somehow it wouldn't boot anymore. And I was able to put a live CD, Mint 19.2, in, and it would boot, which allowed me to access the original hard drive in the machine. And from what I could determine, somehow the boot, whatever they boot Windows with, got overwritten and it wasn't working anymore. But they had, how many? Probably about 2,500 pictures on this machine that she wanted to get off of it. And with the Linux Live CD, I was able to access the drive with a number of USB sticks. I was able to download all the photos and get them off of there. And then I think she went on eBay and found a copy of Windows 10 for $14, which I said sounds too good to be true, but she went and ordered it. I haven't heard any results because now I'm up here and she is down in Florida. But it'll be interesting to see if she can resurrect this hard drive. I was able to run a hard drive diagnostic on it with the Linux Mint, and it came up with 6 bad sectors. I don't know if they had been marked bad or, I don't know. A little bit of a challenge to figure out how to run a hard drive test with Linux Mint. But I did. But it was a learning curve, as Linux is always.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm I have SpinRite, and I like to watch Leo Laporte and Steve Gibson, who's
Yay!
the developed SpinRite.
Right. Are they still alive?
Is this a spinning drive? He is. Yeah, he's talking about getting another 40 sessions in to get to 1,000
Wow.
sessions. Is this a spinning drive or an SSD?
It was a spinning hard drive. It was a 1 terabyte spinning hard drive. Seagate.
6.1 is just coming out, and if anybody who
SpinRite?
had a previous version gets it for free, I think. That's what I
My
understand.
previous version is like 15 or 20 years old.
Well, you can ask about that. Otherwise, if they want one or you want one, you can buy it. They're going to be working on 7, which is going to be a different kettle of fish. Anyway,
Okay.
just a thought, because that's something that can be used to find and fix.
Yeah, that's a good. I used to run that all the time. That was a standby
Hey, Pete,
emergency rescue. Yeah.
I was going to tell you, you can download Windows 10 and run it for free. You don't have to purchase it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that straightforward? What do I do? Go to free?
Well, I mean, you have to. If you want to do it for what she wants to do it for,
Right.
you just download it, and you don't need an activation key or anything like that.
Yeah, it
Do what
comes
you need, do
it's
what you
from
need to do and get rid of it.
our website. So
Yeah.
Okay. That's a
and the
good.
other thing you can do with that, and I just had to do it, is to repair the boot sector. But it sounds like the bad sectors on our hard drive may be the boot sector.
Yeah.
Which I don't know enough about how drive allocations work, but if you reallocate those boot sectors to somewhere else, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that the boot sectors are at the very beginning of the drive.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So if you move them, it might not help.
Yep. But the diagnostic is supposed to do that. There's a checkbox that you can check to try to recover and reallocate bad sectors. But
That sounds like FSCK. Am I off, guys?
That's
File
what I'm
system
used
checker.
to.
Yeah. You talking about file system checker?
Yeah, where you
Yeah.
can also repair.
Yeah.
run it under Linux.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It could be. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Or if it's truly, hardware, and again, SpinRite can do something, or boot repair, or whatever other magic.
Pete, with Windows, Windoze, Windows, there is a EFI partition. So if it got corrupted in some way, that might be part of the problem too.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't remember it would come up when you tried to boot it with some kind of message, that said, kind of hinted that the boot sector was not working or something.
Boot sector and EFI partition are different.
They are? Okay.
Yeah, they're not the same thing.
Is that a UEFI or a BIOS machine?
It was a UEFI. It was about 10 years old, maybe not. 10 or 12 years old. It was a nice machine. It was a small tower. It was a Hewlett Packard 1226. I tried to talk her out of it. I said, well, you're going to have to pay $110 to get another copy of Windows. I'll give you $10 for it. She said, no. Didn't work.
Leander just posted something.
Yeah.
Dick, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I got to bug out of here early. I'm sorry about that, but my wife needs some help. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next month. So
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
So
See you
long,
next
Dick.
month.
Bye-bye.
I missed my chance. I got a question for amateur radio operators. I just got notified by the ARRL that my license is up for renewal after 10 years, and they gave it must have changed quite a bit. It costs $35 now, and you have to have all kinds of information and not URLs. I forget what they call it. Your listing in their database, you have to have that.
ULS.
Yeah, ULS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was.
The FCC went round and round with that fee change thing, and originally it was going to be $59.
Whoa.
And everybody pitched a major complaint and they decided that for the amateur service, they could lower it to 35. So,
Okay.
And you have been out of touch. That's
That was a while
okay.
back.
What
Okay,
about
Dick.
seniors?
It didn't make any difference whether you're a senior or not. So, take care, everybody.
All righty. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Yeah.
Dick. Bye now.
Thanks.
Let's see what else I got. I think that was it. Man. So anyway, I highly recommend having a live CD. It doesn't even have to be the latest and greatest in case you run into issues where you can't boot, but it will boot a live CD. It's worked well in this case. Got a lot of stuff off that might have gone missing.
That's good to hear. Dan, what you got going on?
Oh, well, I don't have a lot this month. I will say that I've converted completely over to MX Linux now, which is, I guess, part of its antics. And I guess that's the way you pronounce it, right, Steve? And so I've heard anti-X, I've heard all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I call it antics. But MX Linux, I went from AVL MXE, MX Edition, to pure MX Linux, and there's no going back. I mean, I love it. What the capability of MX Linux with MX tools is phenomenal, and the ability to take snapshots in the operating system and then build your bootable USB and then boot up on it if you run into a problem is just a great thing. So that's why I moved to it, among other things. So I've moved to that. It's one thing I've done. And the other is I took a bunch of drives off of Leander. And thank you, Leander. Appreciate it. And so I've taken the 3 terabyte, 2 of them I've got already. He's sending me some more. So I've got 2 more 3 terabytes coming. And I'm going to get a 4 bay instead of this 2 bay that I have and build a 4 bay, 12 terabyte capacity NAS from it using Open Media Vault version 6. I think what I'm going to do.
Level 10?
Well, no, that's a RAID you're talking about, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
No, I'm talking about what I want to do, and I may have to pick Leander's brain at some point in an email or something off of the video here or off the screen. But I'm trying to build a logical volume management system so that I see the 12 terabytes of data storage as one volume rather than 4 3 terabyte drives, which I can do, but I want one 12 terabyte NAS, and I can do that in Open Media Vault 6, except it requires me to go outside of the application around it to the terminal and run some commands to build that. And then once I get it set up, I can go back into the Open Media Vault 6 and then work with it. So that's the process I'm in right now. I've only got 2 of them going, and I'm going to get 2 more from Leander here soon. And I'll build a 4 bay. So I'll have, instead of, I've got 8 terabytes right now, and then I'll take that 2 terabyte out, put the 2 3s in and make 12 in the 4 bay enclosure.
Dan,
yeah.
Question about that. So you're not using, so how are you backing it up? Just incrementally, it's not such a big load?
I haven't gotten to the backup phase yet.
Oh.
I haven't gotten that far yet. I will probably do the backup within Open Media Vault.
Does Open Media Vault use RAID, or does it use its own?
It does, so long as you don't use USB connectivity. Open Media Vault will run RAID, RAID 5, RAID 1, whatever you want to run. You can go around again the application and go to the terminal, set up software RAID in Linux, and then go back into Open Media Vault and work with it. It'll work. And I may experiment with that. I've got a 4 terabyte NAS already running RAID 1 that's not related to what I'm doing with Open Media Vault. It's Western Digital. But I want to build a 12 terabyte system using Open Media Vault 6. If anybody's interested in Open Media Vault, I'm up to to doing a presentation on it at some point.
I am interested.
Okay.
And what are you using for a chassis for all these?
It's a
Right.
4-bay. Well, I'm going to get it. I haven't gotten it yet. On Amazon,
Okay.
there's a 4-bay enclosure for 3.5-inch discs, spinning discs.
Okay.
And the two I got off of Leander right now are running great. I mean, make no noise whatsoever, and smooth as silk. And so I'm hoping the other two that come in are the same, and I'll run
Question,
those. Yeah.
Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Are some systems, are some NASs combined hardware, software, and kind of dedicated, or is it just pick any box, put the hard drives in, and then use the software of your choice?
Well, I don't know. My familiarity is with just Open Media Vault 6 or 5 and 6.
And that'll
I-
run with
I-
any hardware.
Yeah, I mean, and there are other applications that will do what I'm doing with Open Media Vault, such as Nextcloud. But I haven't really gotten into Nextcloud. But anyway,
No, I was thinking there's brands I've heard of like Synology, which kind of are dedicated
yeah.
NAS.
Oh, you're talking about the box itself.
I'm talking about the box. I wondered whether, like Synology, does it come with some of them that are boxes? Do they come also with software? And is there a difference?
Mm-hmm. Well, like what I've got right now is a Sabrent hardware device, and it comes with a cloning feature, so that you can put one drive in one bay and clone it another drive of equal type and capacity, at least equal to or greater, in the other drive bay. The one I'm buying is not. It's not Sabrent. I can't remember it starts with a C, but I can't remember the name of it. But it has the ability to clone across 3 drives from a target, from a source drive. So you put one drive in as a source and you got 3 targets. But you can use it as a NAS. You can just plug 4 drives in and set it up through Open Media Vault or Nextcloud and set up your personal cloud that way. And you don't have to worry about cloning unless you want to do that. But yeah, they're different manufacturers, and you can set up. Now there's hardware RAID as well as software RAID, but the devices I have don't have hardware RAID.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve,
Yes.
you're muted. I used to run a hardware NAS with a Raspberry Pi 2B over my local network, and I ran something called FreeNAS, and it worked great. And then they changed the Samba protocol that they were using over the local network because it wasn't secure. So they went to Samba 2, and I was never able to get that installed on my Raspberry Pi and get it up and running again. But it's on my list. Hopefully it'll happen.
Speaking of that,
you
Pete,
can do it yourself.
Yeah, I'm running the Open Media Vault 6. I've got it installed in Debian 11, which is running on the Raspberry Pi. So what I did was, what I can do is, what I've done rather is I've set up Debian 11 operating system. It's called Raspberry Pi OS on the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus model. I was going to put it on the 4, and I may do that because it's got 4 gigs of RAM instead of just 1, so it would run better. But I haven't seen any glitches or slowdowns on the 3B Plus.
And what was the NAS software you were running?
It's Open Media Vault 6.
Open Media Vault.
OMV6. Yeah. So what I did was I installed Open Media Vault 6 on the Raspberry Pi OS using a script.
Okay.
And what you do is you just start the script, walk away. Takes about
and it
half
takes
an
care
hour.
of it.
Takes about a half an hour. When you come back,
Wow.
it's all installed for you.
Okay. I'll have
You
to
don't have
check
to
that out.
intervene,
Sounds
you don't
like
have to interfere with it.
sounds like a learning experience to me.
Yeah. So anyway, I can
That'll be
do a
good because
presentation.
I have a
on that.
Raspberry Pi that's sitting here, and
Yep.
I couldn't think of what I might use it for.
Put it to
There
good
you
use.
go.
Put it to good use.
Ideal use for it. Yeah.
So if anybody's interested, I'll do a presentation on it. May not be next month, but I'll work on
Yeah.
it and put it together.
For sure.
Yeah.
Other than
I have
that,
a question for Dan.
Yeah,
A question for Dan.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Am I on? Yeah, Dan, I'm just impressed to even hear of any discussion of 12 terabytes. And so I wanted to ask, what is the physical makeup of your different collections of your accessible files and then your backup of those files? So the questions are like, what is the footprint of everything that you traditionally use? Do you have a two-tiered collection that is purposely with some things that you consider to be like you're saving them, but you would not care to back them up off-site? So in a two-tiered, what I'm thinking is obviously your most precious things, you would want an off-site backup. So I was wondering, could you describe the footprint of your two collections or one collection, and then how many backups do you have? The NAS is perhaps, and is your off-site backup a part of the NAS, or do you have your protection from fire, hurricane, disaster, theft, etc.? Have you secured that elsewhere in your home, or are you using the cloud? I'm just curious about the topology of these collections. I know you have a lot of material because you do video, but I'm just kind of impressed by 12 terabytes of anything.
Well,
so I'm wondering how you have, what are the actual physical collections?
Rusty, the physical collections quickly is photographs, pictures, albums, archived albums and that kind of thing, and videos primarily. And then thirdly, Obsidian vaults. I've got about 2.3 gigabytes of nothing but Obsidian vaults. And so that's the note taking that I've been doing.
Yeah.
For writing that I'm doing and other things. Will I use 12 terabytes of space ever? No. Am I backing that up to the cloud currently? No. But am I planning on doing that? Yes. And the way I'm planning on doing that, I have a Proton business account that has, I think it's 1 terabyte of space that I can use for that kind of thing. So you can't back up 12 terabytes in a 1 terabyte cloud, but for things that I want to archive, I can push some of that off to my business account at Proton, and Proton Drive it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And it's secure too, it's encrypted, so that way somebody can't grab it. But it's mainly pictures, writing that I'm doing, and video, primarily video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, Brent, I don't have anything else.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Gene? You are muted, Gene.
I'm muted. Okay.
There we go.
I think I'm unmuted. Couple of things. As we were talking about with Pete, I decided that, well, I had one computer. Before I figured out how to do it, I had messed up the dual boot on one of my computers, and I hadn't really felt the need for it. But then finally, I decided that I was going to go back and get it to dual boot again with Windows. What I had done was, I don't know, I still had the partitions right and all that, so I didn't need to do anything there. But I just needed to get the Windows boot, whatever thing. And there are several processes, Pete. The one that Windows takes you to when you have a failure, like sounds like what she had, is a simplified one, but there are more complex and more options there, and you can look that up. And I think it all comes through Microsoft, so you can work you can work it back to where you can get the boot going on Windows again.
Okay.
With their stuff. I put it on a USB stick because it's just handier for me to both boot and to recover using the USB stick. Plus, I think, yeah. Oh, the other reason was if you download the Windows ISO, it's bigger than a DVD, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like 8 or 9 gigabytes, and a regular DVD is only like 7 or something like that. So,
Right.
So you get about a 10 gig USB stick and go to town. And also, when you said the word Seagate, it just seems to me that a lot of the hard drive failures that I've heard about over the years have involved Seagate drives, and I don't know if it's just that my ear is attuned to that, because I think I probably had a Seagate failure at one point too, and swore I'd never buy another one of their drives. But and then the other thing is that because I've been preaching Linux for so long, I've appointed in my family the custodian of the computers. So every time somebody has a computer problem, I get tapped, and I can't always figure it out, and I can't always fix it, but they come to me anyway. So most recently, there was an old Dell desktop that just completely went out. It was probably 12, 15 years old, somewhere in there. And it had an old Intel chip with looked like some sort of African headdress on a heat sink, kind of curved up, and either that or you could have pictured some satyr or devil horns or something like that. Weird thing. But I don't know if it was a heat-related problem or what, but the whole system went down. I think it, come to think of it, is probably a power supply failure. But I just took the hard drive was still intact, so I took that out and folded it over and put it into a laptop that she had. And so now she's using a laptop as her desktop replacement. And that comes back to Leander. And by the way, is Leander gone? I wanted to thank him. Oh, there he is. Thanks, Leander, for the drive. That basically doubled my my storage ability. So I think I have plenty. I don't think I need Dan's 12 terabytes, but 3 is plenty for me. And I guess that's about it for me.
Gene, a question.
Yes.
Can you repeat the name of the resource that you have loaded onto a thumb drive? Is it a freestanding application or OS, or is it something that
I can't remember the name. I just went to Windows and or to Microsoft and Boot Repair, and if you go to there, they offer the tool, and you can download it from them. And you can also download a Windows 10 disk OS from them, but just be aware that it's a little bigger. You can't put it on a CD or DVD. It's a little bigger than that.
And so you install it as an ISO on a thumb drive.
Yeah.
what do you think is the underlying operating system?
Well, I mean, this was specifically for Windows. It was to repair a boot of Windows that I had messed up because I didn't know what I was doing when I first installed Ubuntu 22.
Well, if it's a bootable thumb drive, I wouldn't put it past Windows to distribute a Linux application to solve the problem.
Well, I don't know what the underlying structure of it is or anything, but it just you can go to Microsoft website and it's all there. And the thing that I had, the problem that I had was that it was not one of those simple things. Evidently, I messed up something a little, so I had to go through several steps. I think there was probably 4 or 5 or 6 different steps, and of course, Windows wants to do a check disk on everything before, so it's a time-consuming thing, but it can be done.
Well, and it was benevolent towards the Linux dual boot that you had installed. It did not disturb. It recovered the Windows boot, but it did not disturb the existing.
It didn't interfere with the Linux.
Wonderful.
But even if it interfered with the Linux, I don't worry about that too much because Windows, the Linux backup is so simple. You just back up your home directory. Now that was the other question I had. So put a marker on that. But if you just back up the Linux home directory, you can go, download the operating system, reinstall it, and run your backup, and you're back in business. No worries. So much simpler than anything I ever tried to do with Windows. But yeah, Rusty, it didn't interfere with it at all.
Thanks.
Don't know if I had to do a grub, what they call it, grub repair, which you can do. Steve's nodding his head. He's done it a few times.
Yeah, Gene, there's
Yes.
grub install, there's grub repair,
Yeah.
there's grub update, there's boot repair. All of that's on Antix, and I've had chances recently to try all of them, and they kept on generating new EFI things.
For your sin.
And finally, I realized I had to find the option in the UEFI itself.
Yeah, Steve, the boot repair comes from a company called Cobbler.
Cobbler?
Shoe.
This is specific for Antix, so I'm not sure if it's the
It's a
same
joke.
commercial
It's a joke.
version.
Okay.
What did I say? Put a pin in?
Backup?
Oh yeah. Why did I say that? My brain is going, kids. That was during the process of this getting her computer back in shape, I backed up the hard drive that came out of the desktop, backed up the home directory using rsync. Has anybody used rsync? Do you know rsync? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I backed it up using rsync. And I've done this before. That's what disturbs me is I've done this before and it's worked fine. And I don't know if it was the command line that I was using or what, but I just didn't get it right. I remembered that once I'd gotten a clean install, I'd gone in and deleted the contents of the desktop directory, because when I rsync, it would copy the home directory. So the folders and files and all that would magically appear in the home directory on the new computer, backed up computer. But for some reason, all the desktop stuff came to the desktop itself. And I don't know if I incorrectly deleted the desktop folder or what. I didn't know if anybody had had any experience with that, but I didn't get a good backed up computer thing because it went all to the desktop. And then I said, well, I don't want all that junk on the desktop. So I went through and deleted it, and I deleted all the files that I everything but the hidden files, of course. But I deleted all the files that would have shown up on the desktop.
Gene, I got a recommendation.
Yes, sir.
First recommendation is to put your home directory on a separate partition when you install
Well, I
it.
used to do that, but after a point, I said, I'm not sure that I need to be doing that.
The second recommendation is to use crontab using rsync to replicate all of your home directories over to an external drive of some kind. Let it run automatically every day, like 3 a.m. in the morning.
I'm not sure that I ever want to be that.
Where's that noise coming from?
It's probably me. Hang on.
Yeah. No, you can go into your system and set up a cron tab job.
Oh yeah, I know you can do all that, but I'm just not sure I want to do all that writing. I don't, and this is
you
somebody.
You don't have to do it once.
Yeah, this is not somebody who needs all that. She's just basically, a newbie user.
Yeah.
As am I.
The beauty of that though is that if you ever need to go to get a file or grab a file you've deleted, you don't have to do a restore from a backup in order to get it. Yeah. You just go over there to the external drive and grab it.
Well, like I said, I had done this successfully before, and I don't know what I did this time. So I'm just I'm pretty sure I could get it to work right, but it was just irritating that I had gone to all this, and then I ended up with less than nothing. So anyway, that's pretty much it for me.
All right. Thanks, Gene. Larry, what's going on?
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
I don't really have anything to say about software Linux, but my hardware is probably not appropriate for this group. It's LENNOX. Since Pete was talking about a furnace, I can tell you things about a furnace we've been working on.
There you go.
I'll just hold off on that, and if there's still more time after Brent finishes, maybe I could chime in on that. The only other thing I was going to say was, the internet's a great thing, especially with Linux, as far as I'm concerned. But there's all these negative aspects, like all this stuff about social media and Facebook, for example, that have been in the news. People claim their children have been killing themselves because of being bullied or harassed on social media. And then doesn't seem like to me that ChatGPT is, you hear all kinds of strange things about that these days too. So somehow, I guess you have to take the bad with the good. And with this stuff, that's just my soapbox on this stuff right now. Maybe I'll chime in some more. It's really a hardware, LENNOX. I think it was interesting, but it's like a 51-year-old furnace. But it still sort of kind of works. But, it has to do with motors and transformers and stuff like that. Not really appropriate for this group, but people might be interested. But I'll just stop on that for right now. Let Brent take over.
Larry kind of looked like the guy that portrayed Dave Lennox on the commercials years ago.
Okay.
Favor him. You could be his stunt double.
All right.
Yeah, maybe we'll circle back to heating and cooling. But Leander, what what you been doing?
Yeah, okay, I'm there. Okay, I don't know if I have my hardware mute on or not. Uh, been kind of busy this month. Work as usual with just it's um if your workplace, so I guess not many people have to worry about that, but it ever gets into this thing called Scrum and sprints and capacity planning, it's time to leave. Um, so that's just code word for we're going to make sure your day is full. So it's just been one thing after another there. But um, I did get some new monitors. I don't have that ridiculous set 6 monitor setup. That was something I did when I had some like old spare monitors laying around. I just wanted to try it and try to see how spanning across two graphics cards worked in Linux with the open source AMD drivers. I actually did just upgrade monitors. I got two 27-inch. They're just 1440p. I don't like having to deal with scaling on Linux for 4K, but they are. I mainly got them because they support the DCI P3 color space. They're Dell U24 2724D. They're 120 hertz, which makes a huge difference. Everything just it really scrolling's a lot smoother. It's kind of little things that you notice, but 120 hertz, I don't think I can go back to 60 now. So um, I also stuck I got tired of my motherboard has a 10 gig NIC on it, and I have a 10 gig switch for my file server. And I got tired of the onboard NIC on this motherboard is some kind of um, Atlantic Marvel thing that is super fiddly. It would constantly drop off, and so I just bought a Intel 10 gig uh, used out of a server PCI Express NIC and stuck it in there, and it has been rock solid. Always connects at 10 gig, doesn't drop off and everything. And yeah, whereas the Marvel would, the most I could ever get it to connect at was like 5, and then it would drop off and reconnect. At one point, it started just connecting at 100 megabit per second for reasons I don't understand. And I have a coworker with a similar motherboard with the same Marvel chipset on it, Ethernet chipset. Even in Windows, he says it never works. So just a cheap integrated NIC. But yeah, that's been the most of it. The note taking thing, I still use a notepad, a pen and paper, because it's just easier. Yeah, thanks for taking all my hard drives. I've gotten with my storage to where I want the fewer spindles you have going, the less power you use. And with like 12, 14, and 20 terabyte hard drives kind of floating around out there, you can do a mirror, and you can actually do mirror RAID across more than 2 drives. So you can have 3 drives of mirror RAID and have with ZFS and B3FS and have 2 drive failure um, resiliency. And mirror RAIDs are just a lot easier to rebuild than parity RAIDs. A lot of places have moved away from parity RAIDs with these huge drives. So that's kind of the direction I'm heading. I don't guarantee these drives. Most of them have seen more than 8 years of service. Like you look at the power on, look at the smart data, look at the power on hours, and watch your eyes pop out of your head. They've been used a lot. So I don't warranty them. So they might last another 8 years. They might last another 8 minutes. I don't know, but um, just to forewarn anybody.
At least they're
That's why.
not Seagate.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple Seagates in there, but they're free for a reason. Just putting that out there. But I did test them, so they passed all the manufacturer's tests. So, um, but yeah, that's kind of been where I'm at with the storage stuff. My box is a lot emptier now. Um, yeah, the new monitors, like I said, are nice. 120 hertz. I still like multiple monitors over one big curved one. It just makes compartmentalizing things easier. And if you do any screen recording, you can throw something on a second monitor and not have like your menu bar and whatever else on the screen. Really a lot easier. So um, that works better for me. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I've pretty much had. Yeah. Oh, I have been. I did set back up a Pawigio instance. That's what I linked to for hosting photos because I'm constantly looking for a better way to have like a photo dumping ground for just stuff that's not necessarily portfolio grade, but isn't something that I just want to stick on social media because social media has a huge recency bias. And so if you want to show someone a photo from 2 or 3 years ago, good luck finding it, you know, kind of thing. And I don't really use it anyway. So Poligio is like, it's P-I-G, Poligio? I don't know how to pronounce it, but um, is you can actually, they can host for you. Or you can just run the software locally in like a container. I just have it on a server, but that's one of the things I used it for a while. It is kind of an old school PHP MySQL application. Another one I'm looking at. Um, this one I probably would put in some kind of Kubernetes thing in the cloud, just because it's only comes in a Docker Photo Prism. That's the name of it. Is it's you can host it yourself, but it is container based and really piggish. I ran it on my desktop here, and it really in Podman, and it was really yeah. So I don't know. I'd probably stick that in some kind of like Linode Kubernetes instance or something like that, or a Google or a Microsoft L, uh, Kubernetes thing. So, but those are the two I'm kind of looking at. This is kind of a PhotoPrism's kind of a more modern take on it. Probably a bit more, if you're used to modern web applications, a bit more what you're used to. Poligio is definitely Pwigo is definitely more old school. So that's kind of what I've been messing with.
Right.
Got a question for Leander, real quick. Leander, have you worked with logical volume management in Linux to any great degree?
Yeah. LVM. I mean, that's what pretty much everything Red Hat installs everything with default as. I heard you asking about that. What you probably, if you're looking for, if your LVM has an internal RAID mechanism, but it's not very, it used to not be very good. And I kind of learned MD, Linux multi-device, MD8 admin, and that's the way I would do RAID in Linux these days. Well, really, I mean, I use ZFS for my storage, but I'm not sure if Ultimate Media Vault supports ZFS or not. Yeah, MD admin, like you issue one command and basically you format all your disks to be Linux RAID member that you can do in parted or CF disk or whatever.
Right.
And then you just pass it the command and tell it what RAID level you want it, and it'll make the device for you. And then you treat that device like a normal disk.
Okay. Well, what I've done in Open Media Vault is I've gone around to the terminal and I've set up physical volumes and volume groups, and then I've linked 3 drives into a logical volume. But the only thing is it doesn't show up in the file manager. So I don't know why it's not showing up in the file manager. All the drives are formatted BTRFS.
So if you're using logical volume manage, if you're using LVM, there's a specific, you have to format the drives as LVM members and then add those physical devices to a volume group and then create a logical volume on top of that.
Yeah, Open Media Vault takes care of that for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just not showing up though in the file manager, and I was just curious. I've got an 8 terabyte LVM right now, an LV logical volume, but it's just not showing up in the file manager, and I wasn't sure why it's not showing up.
I don't know much about Open Media Vault, but it shows up if you do like LV display, it shows up in the command line and everything. And
I haven't done that yet. I haven't gotten
Okay.
into that point.
Yeah, check and see. Look, do an LV display and see if it lists it. Try throwing a different file system. Like on the logical volume you created. It's just like an ext4 or something like that, and see if that shows up. I don't know why
Okay.
what default would be, but
Dan,
Yeah.
what about permissions being a question? If
No.
you're looking at it via as user or root,
No, I don't think that has anything to do with it.
okay?
Access permissions isn't really the issue, I don't think. It's a disk issue, or logical volume issue, some kind.
A question for Leander on the software for the photo dumping ground. Did you look at Digicam, which I believe is written in Python, and it creates an index of wherever the folders are that are containing all the photos. It runs through in indexes, and then it's all about managing tags and different metadata of the index, and the index is one of those NoSQL
yeah,
setups.
I've used I mean I've not used it extensively, but I've heard of Digicam. But I'm looking for something that's more web based. For like I could take out my phone and show people photos. Digicam, you can actually back it with MySQL too. But Digicam is real rough around the edges. I just organize things on disk, and then I'll tag inside of Darktable if I need anything. I just treat them like regular files, but I'm not worried about my local organization. Like I can find a raw file or an edit if I need to, but I'm worried about, okay, I've exported this edit and I want to have it available on the web for sharing or sending, kind of an equivalent. Probably the only iPhone user, but Apple has like the iPhone photos thing. We don't use it, but where you can upload your photos to iCloud and share people an album and stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm looking for more than a desktop thing. So, like I said, Polygo works, but it is just from an application management standpoint. It's old school. It doesn't have a lot of movement to it. And I don't know how many in the year of our Lord 2024, how many PHP apps I really want to be deploying anymore. So it's
I hear
that,
you.
yeah. So I'm looking at PhotoPrism just because it's more modern and it'll force me into the cloud a little bit. I'll have to learn how to better orchestrate a Kubernetes cluster and stuff like that. So, but yeah. Unfortunately, good, bad, or ugly, that's just the way things are going in IT. Is it's just like you're not, yeah. It's just I've got to learn to accept it at this point. It's that war has been fought and is over. It's at work we are putting things in the cloud. You really, if you ask to buy hardware, my boss basically looks at you and says, calls you the R word for stupid, and like it says we aren't doing that anymore. So yeah. Yeah, so I'm actually learning Azure, so I'm learning Microsoft's cloud. So I may be retiring my colo setup at some point too. So I don't know. I may just get angry at the whole thing. Decide to chuck all of my data and print off the photos I want to keep and go the Brent way of live out of everything being streaming. So anyway, but I have become a pretty bad digital hoarder. So, and as I've gotten older, I've realized that when I pass away, you know what's going to happen? Someone else is just going to throw it out for me. So no one's going to look through these photos. No one's going to look through these videos. No one's going to care. Even if we have kids, they're going to be like, I don't want to screw this terabytes of photos. We're going to deband these disks and donate them to Goodwill. So, I might as well save. From that perspective, I've become much more judicious about what I actually shoot and keep. And, no one wants to deal with my wall of CD collections when I'm dead. So I may go ahead and save them to trouble. So anyway, for my music, but
All right.
digital hoarder, Dan, hoarder.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. I
Yeah.
changed it
So
purposely.
I kind of get in one of these moods every once in a while where I'm just like, if I don't kick my own ass and get up with the times instead of dragging my feet, then someone's going to do it for me. And right now it's my boss. So anyway,
That kind of goes in well to what I have to say this month. We are uh, healthcare is always a little behind the times, so we are still very much an on-prem organization. That being said, everything we do new, people are trying to push things to the cloud. One thing that we're already doing in a private cloud is our SIM. Well, not my SIM, because I have my SIM, and then we have the SIM that is run by our SOC, which we're not particularly happy with what they do. They have a pretty decent low false positive rate at this point, but I can't point at any single thing maybe one thing they've pointed out. They're like, oh yeah, that's good to know. Other than that, it's just like, yeah, that's boring, whatever. I'm not sure we've had a lot of value out of our SOC, and that's our security operation system, which we are doing as a service. So we are looking for a new way of doing this, and one thing we are doing in relation to that is Microsoft basically offered to give us a trial of their Sentinel SIM, and a SIM, for people not in the know, is a um, security incident event manager, which means it's a log sync. You throw all your logs at it, and you can do fancy correlation searches, alerting, dashboards, what have you. Um, and in the process of doing this, I was a little bit surprised on how they wanted to implement syslog from some of our on-prem devices, like our firewalls. Is they wanted us to stand up a Linux box, and which would run a piece of software that we just get from GitHub, and then that it uses either our syslog or syslog ng to bring in the logs, which is then ships off to Azure. So that's their preferred solution is just a little Linux box. I'm like, and they're like, can you spin up a Debian box to do this? I'm like, oh, sure I can. So one thing I did is they wanted Debian 9 or 10 for this, and I'm like the oldest thing I have laying around is 11 for a template. So we started with the Debian 12 template. I had that ready to go. The morning of, a bit of panic hit me, and I'm like, odds are we're going to run into an issue. So I extremely quickly, and a nice thing about virtual environments is you can do things this quickly. I spun up in about 15 minutes a blank slate Debian 10 instance from ISO. So I had that waiting in the wings, and sure enough, we went through the process. And my guess is I could have made the Debian 12 work with more effort, but given that this, had I only had limited time with the engineer, it's like, okay, let's stop and let's move over to the Debian 10. Sure enough, ran it first time, and it connected up and did everything it was supposed to do on Debian 10. So um, I'm sure if I go back to the Debian 12, I can make it work, but I probably won't because this is a limited time engagement. So that's fun that Microsoft caused us to have another Linux machine on our environment. Um, I recently updated my daily driver here, the one I'm looking at you on, to 21.3 for Linux Mint. As always, every update in recent memory has gone flawlessly. Probably not a terrible idea if I were to rebuild this thing from scratch, because I have done so many updates. But so far, it's done me no harm. So we were talking about sort of system recovery and data recovery. I have used Parted Magic, which is not free. It was free ages ago, and then became not free. And I actually bought it because I liked it so much. So I'm still using the oldest, like the first paid version for it I bought, which I think I was able to get an update at some point because they gave you like a year to update it. But I'm still using an old version of that off of a ancient USB stick for most of my recovery things. Someone mentioned Windows, getting Windows. If you need Windows, you can download it from Microsoft. You can get an ISO, you can put it on a USB stick, and you can install it. Um, and for the vast majority of things, you don't need to register it. That being said, if you need a key for it, for the reasons that folks might need a key, my understanding is there is a um, secondary market for keys that is perfectly legitimate from the standpoint of the user. Microsoft may not be particularly happy about its existence, but you can get these keys and they're fine. I looked, I think, on Tom's Hardware, and they gave very good guidance of where to go and where not to go for Windows keys. So I haven't done it yet. I looked into it because I installed Windows 11 on my son's machine, and every once in a while he's like, maybe we should get this license so I can do this or that or the other with like customization. And we still have it, and it's been running for I think a year and a half or so now. But yeah, you can get for something like $20 a key, which is a lot better than paying full price for the OS. And I recently started using multiple monitors. I have a single double wide monitor that has been doing the job for years, but I had this extra monitor laying around, so I'm just like, well, if I can find a block to put it on that's of the appropriate size to get the right height to match my other one, I'll try that. And I did, and it's kind of janky because the monitors don't match color wise. They don't, the one has a much larger bezel, and it's janky, but I'm kind of like getting used to it. So I'm not sure that doing away with it is going to work at this point. I do have in my back pocket the option of just telling work that I need new monitors, and they would probably ship me two new monitors without a problem. Um, but yeah, that's what I have going on. I think Gene said he wanted to talk. What you got going? What did you have to say, Gene?
Oh, I just failed to mention when I was doing all this that I already had the activation key, and I think you do. There is a place for putting in the activation key, but I think if you just go right around it, you don't have to put it in. And there again, if you don't want to update, if you don't want to use Windows all that much, you're probably okay with not activating it, right? That's my
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah, my son's been running his Windows 11 for a very long time now without activating it, and like I said, every once in a while it makes a little bit of noise about it, but he's going to have to make more noise before I go out and bother to buy anything.
No, I forgot to mention I'm teaching myself German online. I took German 2 years straight when I was in undergraduate, and now I'm doing it again, boning up on it and rebuilding my German knowledge.
I had a German for reading knowledge class because I was a classics major, and so much of the scholarship of classics is in German.
Mhm.
And I don't remember any of it. And a good part of it, the problem with that class is the professor had such a voice that would just put you straight to sleep, and yeah, it was rough because it was also like at the end of the day, like late afternoon, like after most classes were done, like something like 4 o'clock, and yeah, it was not easy to stay awake. He was very entertaining though. Um, there's a there's a joke he made that I still bring up every now and again, that has to do with, I think it was Swedish. So German has, for some of its pronouns, I think I don't, you would know, but there's a dual form. Some languages have a dual form in addition to a single and plural. So the joke was like that it's a joke that only makes sense in the original language. If you guess how many fish I have behind my back, I will give them both to you.
Right. My undergraduate professor in German, like I said, I took 2 years because I had a math degree, working on a math degree. She was from Austria. She was great, and so this what I'm doing now is I'm doing Duolingo for German, and then I'm taking an online course offered through another person who is actually from Germany, and so it's working out pretty good. My longest German word so far is Die Geschwindigkeitsbegrenzungen. You won't believe it when I tell you what it stands for. Speed limit.
Hmm. I was hoping it stands just for something like succinct.
No. So, but anyway, so I'm loving it. I'm taking German.
Well, enjoy. Well,
I,
we're about at time. Is anyone else? We want to talk um,
just
HVAC or?
a quick question before HVAC.
Linux.
There's been two mentions of screen display and choices. I think I will be satisfied with one large screen and one laptop on my left with its screen and one laptop on my right with its screen. But I've become aware, I didn't know how bad one of my laptop screens is until seeing it side by side with a better big monitor. And so I asked the question, is it worth even investigating screen replacement? Or what are the causes of such poor screen clarity that I've moved that one laptop to a bold font just simply on file managers, and it doesn't affect the font on the browser, but for all of the other parts of the window manager, I've just switched to bold, but it causes me to ask, how complex is it to replace a screen? I don't even know if that would solve the problem. What is it that makes us do screens go bad, and what is the thing that deteriorates to make a screen be just less brilliant? And
LED.
specifically for laptops is what I'm wondering is, the nice thing is it's not getting down on the board, and I'm thinking, well, maybe a screen is an easy replacement.
So it really depends on the screen. Like LED backlit LCDs generally don't go bad or lose brightness over time. Your old, like we're talking pre 2010, maybe pre 2009, cold cathode backlit LCDs, they do dim over time and turn red, kind of yellow and red. The backlight does. On long enough time scales, the like layers of the LCD panel, but we're talking like 30, 40 years, will start to get moisture and separate. On the flip side, modern, and this is why I shy away from these OLED panels, also go bad, but in like 18 or 20, somewhere between 24 and 48 months usually. They're the organic LEDs actually will start dying more or less. And so like you'll start noticing color shifts, and they get burn in like CRTs used to do, because part of it will die. And they're really expensive. They're kind of the hardware manufacturer's ultimate dream, because in 24 months you're noticing like the Windows taskbar burned into your screen and looking at a new laptop because of it. So they do get a little bit blacker and the colors are a little bit better, but I don't think the trade-offs. I tend to keep monitors 5 or 6 years, so I don't think the trade-offs are worth it. But a contemporary LED backlit LCD shouldn't go bad in terms of brightness. It probably is just, you were used to a crappy screen and then you got a better one and you're like, wow, this one really is garbage. A lot, especially your cheaper and so-called business class laptops. They just stick the cheapest LCD panel. The actual panel itself is just bad. You might be able to replace that with a better unit depending on what manufacturer. You'd have to take the panel apart. You actually have to take the bezel off and pull the panel out and look at a part number and look at the connector. And sometimes they may have shipped like a premium version of that laptop with a better panel in it, and you can find one of those to stick in there, or whatnot. But usually, unless you're really well versed in hardware, that's usually not a place you're going to go. But yeah, it's a lot. Your latitudes, your ThinkPads, your they usually, especially the ones that are targeted at businesses, are just because people are just looking at Excel and chat all day on it, so they just don't, they just stick the cheapest LCD they can on those things. So, but yeah, that's the long answer. Sorry.
Yeah,
You can always
thanks.
connect an external monitor to your laptop as well
Oh yeah.
and do it that way.
All right. Well, that's all for me. And unless anyone else has something to pipe up with, do we want to talk heating and cooling more? I have nothing to contribute there. I'm a fan of heat pumps, and I'm going to get another mini split system hopefully within a month to maximize the tax credit for this year as I did for last year. So, which is an option, by the way. You can always just ditch that propane heat and go electric.
What brand mini split?
The one I have is Mitsubishi. I'm guessing that that's going to be my next one as well. I'm getting mine through French Bought Electric Co-op. They have a deal where they get them at cost and contract with some local installers to do it. And I mean, it's not cheap, and it's certainly not like do-it-yourself cheap, which is an option. But it's reasonable.
Okay.
I really thought about the DIY options. See, here I am. I'm talking about the heating. Because you can save so much money. But your options are basically like use like a pre-charged line set, which for me would mean a bunch of coiled up line sets looking kind of ugly going around. And assuming you did it right, or get the knowledge and the tools to properly purge and charge the line sets.
What type of Freon do they use nowadays?
Oh, I don't even know. Yeah, it's
I know for the big in-house units, they just recently phased out. There was R12, and then the one that came after,
120?
or something like that. R12, and then there was one that came after it. R12 was bad for the ozone. The one that came after it was bad for the I think it was R40 something. Let's see. But the latest one they just came out with, they're mandating last year. Refrigerant. Let's see. Refrigerant. It's like It's an R500 series, and my HVAC guy is saying that so the new one that they're mandating is not a greenhouse gas, but, and this has given me pause for thought for probably moving to a mini split, is it's highly flammable. It's a very close relative of our good friend butane, which if you have
Uh-oh.
yeah, so if you get a leak in they're having to put all these sensors and stuff near the coil pack, and if you get a leak in your coil pack in your house, it could go kaboom, boom, boom. So in fact, they can't braze lines on this stuff. He was like, it's really hard to work with. He was like, I would move away from central air. If your unit dies, I would move towards a mini split, probably just to keep as much of the explodey stuff outside as possible, because I don't think those have to have this new stuff in it yet. So, but R410, that was the stuff that's been out for the last 20 years. R410 was a greenhouse gas promoter thing. And I don't know if it's directly, but it like whatever it breaks down to when it gets out in the environment traps heat. And then so they're phasing that out for this R500 series stuff, which is butane, so it doesn't degrade into as strong as a greenhouse gas, but it could blow the roof off your house. So anyway, yeah,
Yeah, I
For
think
those
mine's
that
R410A. Yeah.
yeah.
for those that are interested, there's a couple of advocacy groups for ammonia as a refrigerant that is very kind to the environment. And of course, like all chemicals, it can be toxic and lethal, but so can some of the other ones that have already come down the pipe. And all the big commercial refrigeration systems are running on ammonia. And personally, I don't see why someone should not be able to design a safe system for residential use. And it interestingly has some of the best thermal transfer of heat and is in the right zone for condensation and evaporation. But you just don't hear of a residential system set up on ammonia. I certainly would be just as ammonia is very easily sensed in a small leak without being dangerous. It gets your attention, shall we say, and probably gets your attention more than butane or some of these other types of refrigerants. So I fail to understand why ammonia has not been deployed in residential systems. But it's an interesting thing to read on.
Well, I think it's interesting to compare what our neighbors use. Like this furnace that I worked on, 51 years old, is a fuel oil furnace. And it's gotten so it's fairly smoky. It's out black smoke and fumes, and I don't really like using it, but it belongs to some relatives, and they think I'm supposed to keep it working, I guess. So, but my next door neighbor got rid of their fuel oil furnace and got a heat pump. Other neighbors burn wood actually, and probably use some electric space heaters in addition to that. And some people have propane. So it seems like we have everything around in the neighborhood possible. Some of us new, some of us older. So, and we may have the oldest, like 51-year-old fuel oil furnace. And I've been able to get through these cold spells without using it. And last year, when it was 0 degrees on Christmas Day, nothing ever froze. No pipes froze inside or outside. But this year, on the 20th, I think of January, when the temperature stayed in the low 20s all day long and was down 10 degrees or something at night. My water finally froze Sunday. I was trying to run water like every 2 hours, but I fell asleep about 1 in the morning and woke up at 4 in the morning. And when I checked it at 4 in the morning, the water was frozen. But I got out the next day when the temperature went over 30, and I think it froze outside because I have it dug out, a hole in the ground. Single digits for an extended period of time. Most of our pipes are underground, are in the basement underground, sort of, so they don't seem to freeze inside the house. It's just outside where I have it open. I have to do something.
My in-laws had their pipes freeze. Well, the supply from the well freeze that same weekend, and it's actually my house, so it's kind of my thing to worry about. I was worried that something just gone wrong because there's a water softener outside in a shed, but it was fine because I have a little heater in there with it's like a little Walmart heater, like the cheapest possible thing, with a purpose-built like thermostat to keep things from freezing. So it's like on at 37, off at 42, or something like that. But no, that was fine. Everything in the shed was fine. It was just the supply must not be buried deep enough. And I guess this is just something we're going to have to look out for is when it gets cold, the water lines are going to freeze, hopefully not burst, but freeze. And while we were there, right before we were going to leave and just wait it out, the water just started running again.
I've got a currently in our downstairs. Our house is new enough that we have to have two separate HVAC for upstairs and downstairs by the code. And we replaced our downstairs unit a couple of years ago with an R410 heat pump. We had an R12 heat pump that had just corroded away, and we got a dual fuel, so we have a condensing propane furnace that kicks in whenever the heat pump it's too cold for the heat pump to work, which still does happen here, or to work efficiently. And somewhere in the 20s, usually 20s is when it kicks in, and that's been um, I think that's probably in a cold climate, probably your best kind of bang for the buck right now. I think there's um a lot of I think there's a lot of places where the heat pump probably outside of some of the more efficient mini splits, which if your house isn't set up for that, that's another additional cost to have that kind of put in. But that's really been the bee's knees. I mean, we go through like I don't know. I buy propane like once every 3 years. Like we barely use it. It's just when it gets cold. So I really like that setup for a cold climate. If we were a little bit farther down the mountain, like our upstairs doesn't have propane. It's just got the electric strips for the backup. It's still an R12 system too. So the heat pump works down to like 20 something, and then the heat strips kick in and that works okay too, but that can really chew into your power bill and put load on the electric utility too. So if we lived a little bit further down south where it was a little bit warmer, I would say heat pump with electric strips back up I would really go for. But yeah, that seems to be the way that seems to work out the best for us here. So
They really have improved the heat pump heating technology so that it is good, to more around like 0 degrees, even slightly colder. Um, we did fine with ours. It definitely was, you could tell it wasn't as warm in the house. It wasn't because for one, it's one head, right, for a
right.
fairly large area. So it's really more of where the fan was blowing and the cold was infiltrating. But it was by and large keeping up on the
our
coldest night.
ours was a train. It's a train. It's central. It's not a mini split. I think the mini splits are somewhat more efficient than our central units. Ours is a Sear 15 or 16, but it's an XL train XL 15, and it starts struggling in the 20s to the upper teens, and starts to not be uh, as efficient, and so that's when we have it there's some dip switches on the unit you can go and kind of program in the temperature where it'll kick over. I'm sure if you bought a smart thermostat that was connected to the internet it would change it somehow, but yeah, I'm not doing that. So anyway, but you can kind of figure out where it's struggling and kind of tune it based on that. But for some reason the central units just are not as efficient as the mini splits. Of course, central units, then you have vents all over the house, so you don't have to worry about where to put the head and stuff. So it's kind of I don't know why that is. You would think with the way that with the central unit being constructed, having all of that surface area on the big round coil outside, it would be way more efficient just because you've got more surface area to work with, but I don't know why. I don't know if it's just a regulation thing or what. I know a lot of the mini splits usually come from Asian companies, so I don't know, like LG and Mitsubishi.
Well, even a light bulb gives off a little bit. Most of them give off a little heat. That'll keep a pipe from freezing like in the ground. You just hang a light bulb in there. And um, what happened a year ago, Christmas, when the temperature dropped to zero, was my one of my neighbors, the one that got the heat pump that replaced the fuel oil furnace, asked me to come over a few days before Christmas and help her light a little propane portable heater that was in her basement. And I think that's maybe what kept her pipes from freezing, because she said they thought the heat pump froze up and didn't work. And she wasn't even there. And my another neighbor, who was also gone, went down the road like late on Thursday evening. She said she was going to Raleigh. I said, everything's going to freeze around here. And she said later on her mother was in the hospital and she had to leave, and all her pipes froze and broke. So she didn't have water while they worked on it. So she was using the bathroom outside and stuff like that. But those are two of my neighbors' experience. They both left. I was there. I prefer just to hang around when it's that cold to make sure that I know what's going on rather than leave town. I mean, I'd like to leave town too and let somebody else fool with it. Everybody else says, I'm leaving. Well, okay, who's going to deal with it? So I have to hang around and make sure things don't freeze, including myself, I guess. So it's kind of an experience, but my relatives seem to think that this 50-year-old fuel oil furnace has to work to keep the pipes from freezing. It doesn't help anything outside, though. So
I've got to head out too, guys. So I'll
Yeah.
see you later.
Yeah. Well, thanks all.
Me too.
See y'all next month.
All right.
Dan, let me know if you want to do that NAS presentation you mentioned, or if that's going to be a following month or whatever.
That might be the following month, but I'll look at it.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Take care,
All
everybody.
right. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.
See ya.